Washington Bridge Education Foundation thanks you for being a student mentor.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Peyton Johnson. I'm a 2017 graduate of MTHS, and I entered the film business. I started as an electrician, and currently now I'm in specialty equipment for film.
Oh, well, that's very unique. And at what point did you make a decision to start the path of film? And was there anything that influenced you to make that decision?
Mm. I have an uncle who is a post-production supervisor in LA, and he's lived out there for a long time. And he went to Columbia College Chicago. So I remember probably my eighth grade year talking with him, and just having a lot of questions about like what's behind the camera, what are we not seeing in these movies. And so I think by the time I was a freshman or sophomore, I had toured Columbia and kind of decided I was going to go to film school, and that was it.
Wow. So now that you've been through high school and beyond, are there any classes that you took along the way that were beneficial?
Yeah, we had at Metamore at the time, we had a digital video and a digital imaging class, which were pretty basic. And then English classes helped as well, just because of storytelling and being well read, and seeing how to, piece together stories. That was very helpful. Art classes, of course, because it's all about visual language and seeing how you can work in different mediums just to keep you fresh. However, I do wish I would have paid more attention in the personal finance classes, because that has become a big part of my life.
Mm-hmm. How so?
I have many different jobs that come along from many different avenues, and that all require their own paperwork. And I have to keep my 1099s on file, and I have a lot of tax forms. And so doing that right, it takes a lot to be on top of it. But once you learn, it's kind of like, okay.
Great. So business classes would be beneficial and may not be on somebody's target classes to take because they're thinking film and more arts route. So
Right.
great. So as you were so lucky to decide and kind of stick and not change your mind and go along that path, but did you work with anyone to help you job shadow besides your uncle, or did you do any co-ops, any summer jobs or part-time jobs that kind of built your background knowledge on this and to help you on your path?
hmm I always stayed pretty open, because the idea of entering the film world from Central Illinois seems like you feel
Mm-hmm.
very removed, like there's not a place for it. So I was trying to find like what I could do. So I recorded the high school football games, and made like little edits for the parents, which was nice. And then I worked at Washington High School one summer, in the technology department, which wasn't film related, but
Mm-hmm.
again, it was just something to know.
Right.
And then after that, I actually graduated high school a semester early in December, and I went to work at the news, WEK 25 and HOI. I don't think it's 19 anymore, but
Yeah.
the local ABC station.
Right.
I
We
worked
still have
there for
them
like a yeah, I
stations.
worked there for like a year and a half as a news producer, which again wasn't really film, but it was a different type of media, and it was about world issues and local issues. And so I just became, I think, just a little more understanding of my environment and then how to navigate it.
And you did that as a high schooler?
Right after high school.
Right. Great. And so you're deciding this path, you've done some work experience. What steps did you actually take?
Yeah, I think the first um, time I'd heard about it being like an option was, like I said, freshman or sophomore year, when my mother was like, "Yeah, you can go to film school and make that a career."
Mhm.
So until then, I hadn't really thought about it. But then uh, I just toured and looked at a couple different film schools. But for me, it was always really Columbia.
Mhm.
But I have friends from DePaul, from the Art Institute, from um, you know many different film schools that I've
Not necessarily
worked with.
Illinois or
Right, not
Midwest.
Illinois, and maybe not even film schools, maybe just like a technical school that had like a 2-year film program, and people entered the industry that way.
So there are different ways to enter this industry. You chose to go college and you had to apply just like you were going, like anybody going the college route.
hmm
Did you have to have a portfolio?
It was optional. It helped,
Mm-hmm.
but Columbia is very accepting, and I think a lot of film schools are. But they're also not necessary. For me, I felt it was necessary just because of the type of productions I wanted to work on. I needed a specific knowledge set that only Columbia offered.
Mm. Which
And
was what?
at the time they offered physical film, so we would actually load film into the cameras and shoot it, and then send it to the lab to process. And no other school that I knew of was really doing it like Columbia was doing.
Hmm.
Um, that
Great.
has since stopped, and they now are on a like a you know purely digital way of
Hmm.
doing things, which is also fine.
Right.
Um, but the access to the equipment, the access to the knowledge, I had to get through film school. There were too many things that I couldn't learn by
Right.
myself.
Okay. Once you decided the film path, which you did early on, tell us about actually getting beyond secondary school, after high school, getting into school and where it took you from there.
I think the beginning was pretty straightforward, like most universities, was just applying and getting accepted to the school. They said you could submit a portfolio if you wanted to. I did, and it might have helped. I didn't have to submit my test scores or anything because they said they don't think that reflects who I was as an artist or something, which I was totally fine with.
That's
Um,
great.
and then once I got to Columbia, there were some introductory classes of what all the different departments were, and you learn like set etiquette and some of the language of film, and then you take classes that explore your interests. And everybody has to take them. It's a requirement so that you know what the jobs are and how to talk to those people. And I remember hearing an editing lecture, a directing lecture, a production designer lecture, and being like, yeah, these are all okay, but I don't really know what I want to do. And then there was a cinematography lecture that just like stuck with me. I still remember it. I was like, that's how I feel. That's how I work. That's what I want to go into. So I had brought a camera thinking I would be shooting all these movies on my camera and that I would need my own equipment. And that just wasn't the case. Once I declared cinematography, your access to the what we call the cage or the equipment rental facilities is just unmatched. They have every light and every camera and every stand you could imagine. And so after
And you're
declaring
taught how to use
cinematography,
those.
yeah, the classes became less like sit down and let's talk about movies and more, okay, you're on a pretend set, here's how it works. And you can kind of explore what you want to do. So you say, hey, what's this piece of equipment? And then, within your 4 hour class period, your professor can say, oh, here's how to use it, here's how it goes up, here's how you implement it. Um, and so then school kind of splits into two parts. There's like the studio practical portion where you're doing onset skills, and then there's the sit down theory and lecture side of things, which still helps you, um, learn more about movies and what you're
Mhm.
actually trying to make.
And then how did the rest of your schooling go for that?
So my class got whittled down quite a bit because a lot of people leave Columbia. They find if it's not for them, then they should just go pursue something else. So um, the intro class I came in with had like 30 some kids in cinematography, and by the end there were like 6 of us in the BFA program. Um, so it was a tight knit group, and we were all working on each other's films like every weekend. I would have classes. I designed it so that I would have class Monday, Tuesday, all day, Monday, Tuesday, and
Mhm.
then I would be off the rest of the week and weekend. So I could work on student sets or try to get hired for little jobs. Um, so by the end of my schooling, I was already getting paid to work on set
Okay.
on different little jobs.
And so, when you say film, everybody probably jumps to movies.
I'd say movies are like maybe 15 to 20% of the stuff that I work on. The
Okay.
rest is TV shows or commercials or, I
Okay.
worked on a Snapchat ad one time. So the camera was vertical and we were shooting like an iPhone. You
Well, I
just never
have to
know.
ask, and because your career path is different than some of the other interviews we've done. So once you are in school and you're making these connections, do you think looking back that if you hadn't gone to school, you could have still had this experience? Or what would you recommend if you can't afford to go to a film school,
Mm.
but this is still your career path?
Yeah, totally. Um, for me, I was fortunate enough to go to film school. It just
Mhm.
felt like the right decision. Um, but immediately once I was there, the big stress was like just talk to people, just make connections. Like
Okay.
nobody's going to ask about your diploma, nobody's going to care where you went to school. just be friendly, be nice to work with. I've met people who have walked up to people on the street and said, "Hey, I'll, sweep the floors or get your paper or get your coffee, whatever." And then that's how they get in.
Okay.
Um,
But you
so
were
just
at school,
asking
so you
questions
got
and
some experience with setting your schedule up and getting access to the equipment. And what other experiences did you get hands-on then?
a lot of the learning came outside the classroom when we'd be told, okay, you have to have this film that you've worked on for 6 weeks preparing. You guys are going to go shoot it on your own. You have to get the locations yourself. You have to work with other students in different departments and like put it to the test to see if you can, make your movie happen. So that just came a lot from like talking to the older students and hearing what they were doing and getting insight and being like, oh, I'll come help you for free. Oh, I'll just work for a sandwich. Oh, da, da, da. Trying not to overextend yourself, but also trying to get your foot in the door. Um,
So
and
it
then
sounds
those
like a lot of
people,
communication and a lot of group work is in this
a
career
lot,
path. A lot.
very much, very
Okay.
much.
So experiences up to that. If you're a person who doesn't like to work with a lot of people, or you're probably not in the
Right.
right career path, right? Because
But
it's
it doesn't mean you have to be bubbly and giddy and like,
Mhm.
talkative. It's actually quite annoying when you're on hour like 13 or 14 of a workday and people are like cheery and giddy. So you can find your own little space in film and not feel like you have to be reaching out or talking all the time, but just working hard and asking good questions and being there when somebody needs a hand.
Great. All right. So your path, you've gone to school, you've decided cinematography, and how did you wrap up your schooling? Or did it naturally wrap up?
Yeah, I had the idea of getting a BFA in cinematography, which is just like a specialized degree in cinematography. And then the pandemic hit, so I was doing film classes from home, which felt rather silly, like not having my hands on proper equipment, but like taking photos of my bedroom at different times of day to see what the light would did.
Mhm.
And I actually learned some valuable things from that. But most importantly, it taught me that I had outgrown film school a little bit, and I had met enough people, and even my professors had told me like, I think it's time for you to go. You shouldn't stick around and try to finish the BFA. So I got a BA, and I did end up graduating from Columbia,
Mhm.
um, and left on fairly good terms, but a little earlier than I'd planned.
Okay. And where'd you go? What are you doing?
I stayed in Chicago. I stayed downtown for a bit, and now I'm closer to the west side. I started as an electrician, just putting up lights and plugging things in. And now I'm in specialty equipment, which is cranes and remote heads and um, like a lot of expensive gear that we have to take out and get specific shots with for movies or different productions.
What's a typical work day for you?
When I was an electrician, it was show up with your tool belt with like a wrench and a socket tester, and you just show up on a truck, you eat breakfast, and then you're on set all day.
Can I stop
Um,
you right there though?
yeah.
So you don't have an electrician uh, degree. I mean,
So how it worked for me in the cinematography department is there's lighting and camera. And in the lighting department there's grip and electric. So grip is stands and sun blockers and things like that. And then the electric is putting up the lights and plugging in the lights and running power. So it's very much um like you just need to be a hand for the
okay.
cinematographer.
Mhm.
So it's not entry level, but it's easier to break in that than it is some other departments because you can just shadow somebody on set. And a lot of what we learned at school was how do you run power to a light that's in a field? Like, how do you make that work?
Okay.
So there was a base knowledge showing up on these sets. The jobs come from friends who recommend you. That is a big, big way to get a job, is because
Okay.
somebody put your name in. There's also a union permit list for grip and electric where you say, I'm available and here's my skills, and they might call you if they need a hand.
How did you find
Um,
out about all this, these unions, and it, was that taught in school?
yeah, yeah, it's talked on in school because it's how the industry works.
Mhm.
And there's also a lot of stuff online about it. They have a lot of resources. The Society of Camera Operators, the Cinematographers Guild, all of these different places where you can go learn about membership and what it entails and how to
Okay.
work. But my break, I would call it, I was doing like a lot of low level movies and TV shows, and just as an electrician, and it was fine. And then I had a teacher uh, who asked me. I was also doing camera work at the time, camera assisting, and he asked me, "Hey, we're doing one day for the Netflix documentary Cheer. We're just shooting some B-roll around Chicago." And I was like, okay. I went and did the job. It seemed fine, and because of that, I met uh, somebody who's now my best friend, who introduced me to cranes and took me to Florida to work on a job for 5 weeks. And in doing so, I learned how to operate all of this equipment. And now I'm no longer an electrician. I'm in specialty equipment.
Right.
So
So listening to you, I'm gathering that where you position yourself as far as living can make a difference of how you make connections, or do you feel like you could live anywhere and
yeah,
make?
not in the beginning at all. Living wherever you want is a privilege that comes from years of work and being on uh, massive productions. I've worked with camera operators who like live out in the desert by themselves, but they get flown in to do jobs because they're that well known. But when you're just starting off, you have to be somewhere like Atlanta, New Mexico, Chicago, LA, New York, Toronto, just any hub where there's a lot of productions being done.
So this is not really a typical or standard career we hear about. So I don't expect that it's a typical day of work for you. Could you explain what a day or a week of work is like for you?
Sure, it's very different all the time. I get a job right now through checking our group calendar with the guys that I work with, or from getting a text saying, "Hey, are you free these days?" And then you hold the day. I usually don't know the projects I'm working on until maybe a week or 2 weeks out. That seems to be right now, at least. Sometimes I'll know a month in advance, but it's crazy if I know a month in advance what I'm going to work on. So, like for example, in January and February, it's really dry in Chicago and work-wise, and there's not a lot going on. So I think since the beginning of the year, I've worked 6 days, 6 or 7 days,
Okay.
which is enough to sustain, like to be able to live in Chicago. It's skinny, but like you can make it happen if you prepare for it correctly. Because once the shows start and once the TV shows are going, you might work 4 days a week, or you might go to Detroit and work for 2 weeks. Um, and then you've made rent for 4 or 5 months. So
Mhm.
um,
Okay.
yeah, but being flexible and having a lifestyle that um, isn't overindulgent, so that you can make it through the times where you're not working, is very important.
Well, I see where your advice about personal finance and so forth, learning that along is going to be needed to get where you are at this point right now, because it must be hard to manage that when you're not like an office job or a hospital or somewhere where you're going into every day. It's a very different career path. So
Mhm.
so far, what would you say are the pros and the cons that you've come across with that, being that this is
Mhm.
your typical schedule?
Yeah, the cons are pretty low. It's just the learning curve, understanding that like the first winter I went through in Chicago on my own trying to work, I was like, okay, this is not a good recipe. I need to be more prepared. Um, if you're going to have relationships, like I live with my girlfriend, but she's very understanding of the schedule and very open to it, and
Mhm.
knows that I might be gone super late nights or have to wake up early in the morning. But for me, it's really, I think, built for my type of personality and my way of living. Um, because I
So
do have a lot
not a
of free
Monday
time.
through Friday 9 to 5.
No, not
Mm,
at all.
okay.
Not at all. And I, you know, have a lot of hobbies that I like to pursue, and this helps me like stay up on them. And like I said earlier about not being one dimensional, this job keeps you anything but. Like, you need as much life experience as you can
Right. So a lot
to
of
be good in it.
organization, a lot of um, non-typical weeks, and a lot of travel. So pros for a lot of people, maybe a con for somebody else looking into this career. So that's good to know. And what about physicality? Is it a very physical job?
Yeah, certain jobs. My roommate in college, he now works at a post house, editing commercials. So he does sit behind a desk all day and has a 9 to 5, um, which is great because that works for him. But uh, the on-set people, if your goal is to be like, you know, there during the production of the movies or TV shows, then it is very taxing. You're on your feet a ton. you work anywhere from, I've had days as short as 4 hours, and I've had days as long as like 15, 16 hours. Um, which the pay is nice, but by hour 15, you start to see, you're like dizzy and tired, and um, but they keep you well fed and keep you hydrated, but you have to, it's definitely a certain lifestyle. Lots of time away from home if you're going to work on a long TV show, stuff like that.
Sure. And so way back when you said you knew that you thought this is the career path you wanted to go down, and you did some job experiences and you went to film school, and you're currently on the path of cinematography for special equipment. That's just the beginning. You graduated when? Did you say 2018?
21, or at high school,
From high
2017.
school, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So you're not very far out. What do you see your goals being from here? Now that you've experienced this much, where do you see it going?
Mm. Well, it's changed quite a lot because I was very eager, and I think like most film students, I went in thinking I would be a director or a cinematographer right out of school. Um, so if you'd asked me back then, I want to shoot my first movie and I want to do this and that's completely changed. I'm uh, very much now not taking it slow, but comfortable with where I am with the shop and the equipment. So it allows me to work on a variety of different productions and learn and meet new people and ask about how they balance their work-life balance and how they go about shooting, or learning new ways of doing things. So I think my goals are fairly open right now. I'm not exactly sure where I want to end up, but I know it's somewhere within specialty equipment or camera operating or something of
Will
the
that
sort.
keep you here Midwest, or do you foresee yourself moving far? You just don't know. Hard to
I
tell.
don't know. It's also a choice. Like right now, the people I work with are out of Chicago, and we love Chicago, and I like the work and the mentality of the crews in Chicago. So
Mhm.
so that to me keeps me central. And then because so much travel work comes from Chicago, it's also nice.
What advice would you give to someone who's, just thinking that, oh, maybe this is a career path I'd like to go down?
Sure. I think initially there's a lot of excitement because it's such a unique industry that's always changing and the jobs are always different. But uh, just try not to get discouraged. It might seem like it's not going to work or like the work is dried up, but people are always looking for people to work on set, and there is a need for people to make movies and content, especially now with so many streaming platforms. So say yes, be open to as many opportunities, even if the job doesn't sound great. If it's even vaguely in the realm of film, go do it.
Mhm.
Um, and if that also means no, I want to be true to whatever avenue I want to go into, then get a side hustle, get a job that helps you live and frees you up from being able to, or rather allows you to say yes to the job, because
Mhm.
that's really how to get in. Is if you're the one who's saying yeah, I'll be there, and not no, no, sorry, can't this time. You're
Mhm.
not going to get called anymore.
Mhm.
So it was important for me, like in school when I wasn't making much money on film sets yet, I was delivering food on my bike, and that allowed me to not have to get like a stable job that would make me say no to being on set.
Mhm.
Um, but
Okay.
yeah, if you really care about it, you'll find what works for you, and you'll do what needs to happen, and just talk to people also in the industry because everybody feels the same way. They feel like they're not going to work again, or that
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine it's scary. Like you mentioned that there are stretches of time where there isn't work, or you would have to really go and seek it out. Uh,
Yeah,
and that may never change for you. That's right now, but that may be the case for many, many years in this career.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky to have some stability this early on. I feel like is rare with the shop that I'm at because of the saying yes and going to do this really low paid movie in Florida that I was a part of. I got to learn the equipment, and then in doing so, they said anytime that equipment gets called, you're the person who gets to take it out.
Mm,
Um, so just saying yes and being available landed me a job that I honestly didn't even know existed, like specialty equipment.
that's great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to spread your knowledge to help other community members decide and bridge to a path, hopefully, that will give them success in their life. And we'll start watching for your name and some credits that are rolling up at the end of any production. It sounds like I need to start getting
Thank
on
you.
Netflix and and something
Yeah,
else.
call my mom. She's got the resume. So
All right. Well, that's great. Thanks for being with us.